Welcome to The Top Shelf, my Criterion DVD review series. This is episode 53. Today we will be looking at Yasujiro Ozu's Late Spring. My name is Ernest Whiteman III. I'm a Northern Rappel filmmaker, artist, writer, and media educator. And we're taking a look at my top shelf. Lately I've been just selecting the last few films that we will talk about. And the next one I got a mic set up right here, so I keep bumping into it. Is Yasujiro Ozu's Late Spring. This is the first part of what is considered or called the Noriko Trilogy, where Setusuko Hara plays a character named Noriko in Late Spring, Early Summer, and Tokyo Story. And in it, all the stories concern her being married. In this one, she plays the daughter of Chishu Ryu's Hirayama, Mr. Hirayama, who is, I guess, a scholar, and they live together and she takes care of him. And the story concerns her aunt and her best friend wanting her to suddenly get married because arranged marriages were a thing of that Japanese culture of the time. And Ozu tackles this issue a lot in his films. The idea that the young independent Japanese woman suddenly needs to be married or married off, and how that affects the family dynamics, how it affects friendships. And it was a theme he kept coming back to over and over and over again. And this is, I think, where he actually started to sort of refine his style. And everybody knows that he used the tatami shots, which were the camera is set 3 feet off the ground or the height of eye level if you're sitting on a tatami mat, and used always a fixed 50mm lens for no matter what. And he also did not adhere to the 180-degree rule. People would speak, when in conversation, would look like they're speaking directly to the camera, and he would cut between them. With ill regard for the 180-degree rule. Yet it is his establishing shots, commonly called pillow shots, because they sort of cushion between the scenes, which sometimes seem random, but most of the time it's mainly to give you a layout of the house, so that when people walk through, and it's very ingenious that Ozu did this, that when people walk through you know exactly where they're walking to, even though he didn't adhere to any sort of spatial continuity. So his pillow shots were really what he became known for. It includes one of the most controversial pillow shots, which is just a shot of a vase in the hotel that Noriko and her father are staying at on their final trip before she gets married. And there's been a lot of controversy and conversations and theorizing on what that vase means, because it's an emotional point for Noriko as she's coming to accept the concept both of marriage and remarriage, because a family friend had remarried and she didn't really like the idea of a man remarrying. And then when she comes to this realization, it cuts away to a vase. She's smiling and happy, and it cuts back to her. Then she's sad again. Then it cuts back to the vase, and it cuts back to the vase twice, which is not something that he commonly did, is he didn't cut to the same thing twice. So that led to a rise in theory. Me, I just think he liked vases. But another thing that's Ozu is always criticized for is there's no movement in his shots. His shots are all static, and you see memes and jokes about him, like, if he took a selfie in a mirror, the most movement you ever see in Yasujiro's film is him moving the camera to take a picture in the mirror, which is not true. There's a lot of movement in Yasujiro's films. It's just that you got to pay attention to them, because there's subtle movements, whether it's a tracking shot across a scene that just happened, or it's tracking through an empty space, or, like I said, tracking through the house so that you know the layout. One of the most common uses of tracking shots is a following shot. Whenever a character splits off from their ideology, in this case it's into singlehood, she makes up her mind that she doesn't want to hang out with her engaged boyfriend anymore. Boyfriend in the sense that it was her friend, but he was engaged to somebody else, and they were hanging out a lot. And he invites her to a music recital, and she declines at that point, making a stand that, it's time for him to, behave as a married man, and for me to behave as a single woman. And as she's walking home, it cuts to him alone at the music festival, but it tracks with her as she walks home alone. And it does this again in Tokyo Story, where the Hirayama parents find themselves all alone in the city because their kids have no time for them, and so they decide to split up. And the father's going to a friend, and the mother's going to the character Noriko in that story. But as they decide for themselves that they're going to take charge of this and do what they have to do to get through going into Tokyo, there's a tracking shot following them as they make this decision, and they're all alone in the city. So he uses tracking shots and camera movements a lot. There's a great dolly shot in early summer as the two sisters come to a compact when it comes to marriage. So don't let anybody tell you otherwise. There's a lot of great camera movement in those Ozu films. So let's break out the glasses, and I'll get you information on this disc. It's a 2-disc. This is the remaster, despite it having a black case. Disc 1 has a high-definition restoration of the film, audio commentary by Richard Pena, program director of the New York Film Society at Lincoln Center, and no English translated subtitles. Disc 2 has a documentary by Wim Wenders from 1985, 92 minutes, called Tokyo Ga, and it's just about his admiration for Yasujiro Ozu. And it's a pretty interesting film. I've seen it, and I always love it when they put an extra film in these discs, because it makes me feel like I'm paying 2 for the price of 1. Of course, the featured booklets with all of the essays and writings by historians. And this is from 1949. It's 108 minutes. It's a beautiful little story. It's a very simple story, as our Ozu's lots of films, but the things that they detail, the generational differences, the changing traditions of Japan, especially from late 1940 to the 60s, where he shifted his focus from the older generation to the younger generation, is very telling, especially as he moves into color. When he starts to do color films, then you see that he's very focused on the young characters, and I think that brings a vibrancy to his films. Things like A Good Morning were about the 2 young grandkids trying to get a television, which is a very funny comedy. I would greatly suggest getting Late Spring. Spy number 331. Next time we'll be talking about something that isn't in the Criterion collection, but in the Eclipse series that Criterion puts out. It's one of the post-war Kurosawa films called No Regret for Our Youth. Thank you for joining me. I'll catch you next time.